But my name is Madison Oman, and I am a conservation coordinator for the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. We're very excited to have Drew Harrison with us today, and I will just go ahead and turn it over to Virginia to introduce herself and to introduce our guest speaker.
Virginia Holman. I'm the founder of the Island Wildlife Chapter, and today we're delighted to host Drucilla Drew Harrison, the Director and Community Conservationist at New Hanover Soil and Water Conservation District. Drew serves as the lead contact for land conservation and acquisition. She manages the environmental education of the district and provides technical support for design and best management practices to improve water quality and reduce soil erosion. Drew is a 2004 graduate from UNCW. She received her environmental education training in 2007 from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality and has completed several other trainings, including the UNCW Leadership Academy. Drew has served as an officer on several committees, including the Lower Cape Fear Stewardship Coalition, Wilmington Earth Day, Coastal Envirothon, Eagles Island Coalition, and the North Carolina District Employees Association. Drew was also selected as a finalist in the 2016 YWCA Women of Achievement Award. Today, she'll be speaking about one of the most important issues that we face in our area, stormwater, and its impact in our communities and in our waterways. And with that, I'll hand it over to Drew. Drew, thank you so much.
Thank you, Virginia. That introduction makes me sound a whole lot fancier than I feel, so I appreciate that. So today we are going to be talking about stormwater and the impacts, how you can make a difference, and answer any questions that you may have. So this presentation is in conjunction with the City of Wilmington Stormwater Services. New Hanover Soil and Water Conservation District partners with the City of Wilmington to help them fulfill their Phase 2 stormwater permit that is regulated by the EPA. And this presentation is one of their outreach efforts that we coordinate with them to help educate citizens about stormwater. So today we're going to talk about, we all live close to the water if you're in Wilmington. The ocean is on one side, the Cape Fear River is on another. We are very much like a peninsula in the sense that it does not take a drop of water very long to get to a larger body of water unless it soaks into the ground. And a lot of people come to this area for surfing, fishing, kayaking, boating, paddleboarding, the view, all those types of things. And stormwater impacts those things as well, and that's what we're going to go over. So what the basics of what we're going to talk about is what is stormwater, what's the problem with it, and what are simple solutions that everybody can do to make a difference. So that's the important part. If everybody does just a little bit, then that adds up to the bigger piece of the pie or the greater good. So everybody has seen one of these, but just in case you're unfamiliar, this is a storm drain and this is what we're talking about. A lot of people don't really think about where this goes. And in a survey, 2/3 of North Carolina residents believed what went down this drain got treated. So a lot of people feel like or think stormwater is treated. However, that is a false assumption. It is not treated. And if you don't learn anything else today, that's the point I hope you remember, that stormwater is not treated and it eventually runs into our waterways. So stormwater runoff is rainwater that flows over land through the stormwater system and then directly into our creeks and waterways. It does not soak into impervious or hard surfaces like roads, driveways, sidewalks, roofs, those types of things. And when it flows over these impervious surfaces, it picks up and carries pollution from our land to the local bodies of water, and again, not treated. Most pollution in the coastal plain area washes off in the first 1.5 inches of rain. So if we're installing a physical best management practice, such as a rain garden, that's the amount of water it is designed to capture, the first 1.5 inches. Something else that folks don't realize is once you reach 10% of impervious coverage in a watershed, you will see a negative impact on water quality. So it doesn't take a huge amount of impervious surfaces to make a large impact. And I'll give you some statistics. So Burnt Mill Creek, and you'll see a map of it here soon, has 39% impervious coverage. Greenfield Lake has 37. Bradley Creek has 28. So, and ironically enough, even though Bradley Creek only has 28, it has a larger amount of degradation than some of these other watersheds. So Bradley and Hewlett's are focused watersheds within the city limits that we're working to improve water quality specifically. So I want to be clear about the types of systems we're talking about here. There's the drinking water system, and you can see they take it in from the Cape Fear River, treat it, and it goes to your house. And it's called the brush and flush system, basically. Anything that's potable comes from here. That then is piped out to the wastewater treatment system, which is cleaned, and it's actually cleaner when it is discharged than when it is taken in by federal law. What we are talking about today is this system. And you can see here's the pollutants that are running directly into those areas. I thought that I had little pointers. I just didn't know the right button to mash. So what is a watershed? What I tell all the 8th graders is it is not a shed with water in it. You may have seen these signs around town, like you see this one here, the blue one that says Hewlett's Creek Watershed. That's to help folks be aware of where the water is flowing to. And a watershed is an area of land where the water drains from the highest point to the lowest point. So it's a drainage basin. We all live in a watershed, and we all live in a river basin. So watersheds are smaller units, and then river basins are larger units. But the definition is similar in the fact that it drains from the highest point to the lowest point into the largest body of water in the area. So you're always in a watershed. And if you think about it, we all have waterfront property with that philosophy or theory. So this is a map of Wilmington watersheds. The black line is where the city limits are. The green watersheds are tidal, which means they're influenced by the tide and they drain directly into the intercoastal waterway. The orangish yellow ones go into the Cape Fear, which also eventually runs into the Atlantic Ocean. So if you notice, there's a star on there. That's where the mall is located here in Wilmington. So the Independence Mall is actually in Hewlett's Creek Watershed. And this map is drawn and delineated through GIS. So the city went through and collaborated with their GIS department and said, where do all the permits pipe water to? Where's the stormwater pipe to? And that's how they made the boundaries on this map. So several of our local waterways are on the state impaired list, which means those waters do not meet classification standards because of some kind of impairment. Impairments like BMC, which is the biological integrity or the benthos of the water, which is basically the bottom dwellers. How healthy that is. So Greenfield Lake is impaired for chlorophyll, which is from nutrients from phosphorus and nitrogen that cause algal blooms. And then there's tidal creeks that are also impaired, and that's because of fecal bacteria, which we're going to talk about specifically, and it ends up closing those tidal creeks to shellfishing. So let's take a closer look. We're going to look at a couple of different pollutants and see what the problem with the pollutant is and then what the solution is. So I know this is a lovely picture to see after you've had breakfast or lunch. However, this is a really important piece of information for the Wilmington area. There are approximately 55,000 registered dogs in the city of Wilmington, New Hanover County. That means 41,000 pounds or 21 tons of dog waste goes into our water per day. So 21 tons, if you think about 3 male elephants, that's about what you would see conceptually if you saw it somewhere. And the harmful part is 1 gram, which is the size of a paper clip, contains 23 million bacteria. So if we've got 21 tons, but it only takes something the size of a paper clip to put in 23 million bacteria, think about how many bacteria are actually there. And uncollected pet waste harbors bacteria, viruses, parasites, and it pollutes the water. It's actually the #1 water pollutant, non-point source water pollutant in our area. That is why it is closed to shellfishing. Bacteria can make humans and animals sick, causing infections, intestinal issues, diseases, and in some cases death. And that, again, is what leads to shellfish closures. They actually test for something called fecal coliform, and that is an indicator of other harmful bacteria such as E. coli or salmonella in the water, and that's how they choose to regulate if it's open or closed to shellfishing. So this picture is the foot of a woman who had a cut on her foot. She waded into the water to launch a boat at a local boat ramp. Her foot got infected and she ended up in the hospital for 3 days, pumped full of antibiotics. I had the same thing happen to me a couple of years ago, and I refused to take a picture and share it with the city because I did not want to be the example in the presentation. But we are fortunate here at the county that we have a physician's assistant that's on staff. And so I went immediately on Monday and I was like, you have to give me antibiotics. My foot's going to fall off. I know what's in the Cape Fear River. I can't. It's one of those things, you know, too much information for your own good. So, simple solutions. What can you do? Pick it up. And it's not just the bacteria, it's the gross factor also of stepping in this. If you want to make your neighbors angry, leave it laying around the neighborhood because I think it irritates a lot of people. So it needs to be cleaned up immediately though. So while you don't necessarily see dog waste floating down the street or the stream, it breaks down and that bacteria gets into the storm drain system. You can also get something called a pet waste digester, which is basically like a septic tank for dog poop. You put it in the ground, put the pet waste in it, and put water in it every so often, and it biodegrades that way. As far as cats go, putting outside litter boxes is helpful. And excuse me, not flushing it down the toilet. It is actually a Cape Fear Public Utility Authority ordinance that you do not flush animal waste down the toilet. That is because their waste is different than humans. They have to process it more to get it cleaner, and it causes blockages in the system because pets' food intentionally makes their waste clump together so it's easier to clean and pick up. And there is a pet waste ordinance in the city of Wilmington. If you do not have a bag on you, you get a $250 incentive to carry it on you in the future. That applies on public property. If you're having an issue, some homeowners associations have fines specifically, but Wrightsville Beach is also another area that they really enforce this. And if you think about it, if the first 1.5 inches of rain makes this wash into the water, who wants to go to the beach then? And if you go to the beach, are you going to get an infection of some kind because of what's in the water? So those are things to think about as well. Fertilizer. So we want to make sure that folks know we're not saying that all these pollutants are bad, but if they're not used correctly, they have negative consequences, kind of like candy. You can eat candy, but if you eat too much, there's going to be negative consequences. So when fertilizer is over-applied or applied incorrectly, when it gets on sidewalks and pavement, it just washes away. And nitrogen and phosphorus in fertilizer cause severe nutrient pollution in our waterways. So here's an example of such nutrient pollution here locally in Greenfield Lake. It is not called Greenfield Lake because it looks like you walking across a green field. This is actually a more recent problem due to impervious surface in the area. So the nitrogen and phosphorus in the nutrients fuel excessive algae and aquatic weed growth because it's doing its job. Phosphorus and nitrogen make plants grow. But what happens is when aquatic weed growth, when it eventually decays, the result is low oxygen levels, causing fish kills and other issues in the aquatic environment. And all those things have happened at Greenfield Lake, and the city does everything they possibly can to try to mitigate that. They have aerators in the lake, they have sterile grass carp in the lake, and they also sometimes have to chemically treat it to keep the algae in check. So fertilizer solutions, you can grass cycle. That basically means you leave your grass clippings on the yard and the nutrients percolate back down into the soil because you've already fertilized once, so why throw away fertilizer? You can install native plants. They don't take as much fertilizer, pesticide, or water because they're adapted to the area. However, just because it's sold at a garden store does not mean it's native. You have to do your homework a little bit. Example, privet, not native, and they sell it at Lowe's. It's very invasive, actually. English ivy. It has English as in England in the title, not North Carolina ivy. So sometimes it's a dead giveaway if it's native or not by what it's named. So that's something to keep in mind. You can also have your soil tested. It's $4 from the end of November to the end of March, or it's free the rest of the year. And it's set up that way because they have to hire more help during that time because that's when farmers are sending in their soil samples for crop production. But you can get a kit from Cooperative Extension, and it will tell you the type of nutrients your lawn need, timing, and other important information. Something else that we fail to do as adults sometimes is follow the instructions, which is, pretty simple, but important. And then keep this fertilizer off your sidewalk or driveway. You're not going to make it grow if you put fertilizer on it. It's only for plants. And again, it'll just wash away. There's also the fact that you shouldn't fertilize right before it rains because it's not going to have time to absorb into the ground. Again, it's going to wash away. Yard waste causes problems. This is leaves, grass clippings, pine straw. It also clogs storm drains and can cause flooding. Yard waste is organic, so again, it adds to that nutrient pollution that is going into our waterways as well. So solutions, keep the organic matter out of the ditches, the drains, but also remember it cannot go to the landfill or should not go to the landfill. If it goes to the landfill, it's not going to decompose or decay properly because there's no anaerobic activity once it's delivered to the landfill. You can grass cycle, again, composting or you can have a disposal company come and pick it up depending on the amount of yard waste or debris you have. Obviously, during hurricanes, we have to have extra help. Again, there is also a $250 incentive not to blow it or sweep it down the storm drain. If you see a contractor doing that, you can report them. They get a warning letter, and then if they get reported again, they get that $250 incentive not to do it anymore. So I am diligent about watching yard companies, and I am pleasantly surprised about how many of them know not to do that. I hope they didn't learn the hard way is the only thing I can say. So pesticides, it's a chemical, and it kills insects, weeds, fungus, but it also kills the organisms that are essential for our gardens and yards as well. So it can cause drastic changes in species. Obviously, this frog has 6 legs and is a bioindicator that the water it was living in was not healthy. It can cause sex changes in fish, and they're known to kill bees worldwide. And a famous pesticide that we used in the 60s and 70s was called DDT. Worked great, killed everything. Also led to the degradation and decline of the brown pelican, ospreys, eagles, large birds of prey. And so we realized the detriment to the environment with using DDT, and we banned the use, and lots of these organisms have made a comeback in the environment. So the brown pelican used to be on the endangered species list and is not anymore because of not using DDT anymore. So, and there's lots of animals that we could use examples of that show what we do impacts other living things on the planet. One last example I'll give you, killer whales, orcas, they're at the top of the food chain. Most of the time, if not all the time, if they wash up on shore, PCBs and pesticides are found in their body. And PCBs are basically a man-made chemical that was made in the 70s, and it's used in coolants, lubricants, and in electrical equipment because it's a good insulator and it doesn't burn easily. But when it enters the air, the water, or the soil through manufacturing, use, or disposal, or accidental spills and leaks, then is when it causes a problem and gets into the environment and impacts the wildlife. And this can even be found in newborn calves. So the mother will pass it on to the calf if they have it in their body. So what's bioaccumulation? Bioaccumulation is when a chemical, in this case pesticide, builds up in the food chain. So humans are at the top of the food chain, and we will accumulate the most toxins in our body. So if you look at this diagram, you can see, let's say each one of these little dots represents some pesticide. So this fish has a little bit. Well, when this fish has some too, and when it eats this one, it gets what's in that one, and then it works its way all the way to the top. An example of this that you can think of easily is mercury. That's why they tell pregnant women to limit fish and shellfish consumption, because of that bioaccumulating. So pesticide and chemical solutions, again, native plants are helpful because they use less of those. Use it as a last resort. Spot treat, just because one plant in your yard has insects or problems does not mean you have to spray all of them. Again, follow the directions. Do not apply before it rains. And then you can do an IMP, which stands for Integrated Pest Management. And it uses cultural, biological, and mechanical methods to eliminate pests and weeds, and resorts to treatment as the last resort. So what I say here is, if you have children or grandchildren and you need to give them some manual labor, they can be your integrated pest management system. Also, it's good for you to be outside and get your hands in the soil. So there's proof that touching soil, and notice I'm calling it soil, not dirt, because I work for soil and water. Touching soil actually helps create positive pheromones in your body. So sometimes I feel like I need to be like a little pig and roll around in it just to make me feel good. But that's more incentive for you to use an integrative pest management system. You can also have alternatives like purchasing ladybugs. If you have aphids, you can purchase praying mantises. I don't know of a store here in town that does it locally, but I know you can buy them off the internet, and they will arrive. They put them in a cooler so they kind of stay sedated, and then once you take them out, about 30, 45 minutes at room temperature, they wake up. Sediment problems. So sediment is actually the #1 water pollutant in North Carolina. And it comes from construction, it comes from bare lawns, it comes from poor farming practices. There are multiple places that sediment and erosion can come from. It causes the water to look turbid or have turbidity, and that's when the water looks like chocolate milk. We have black water rivers here in this part of the state. That means they should look like tea. And that's from the tannins from the leaves that fall into the water. That is not tea. That is like hot cocoa or chocolate milk. And if you are an animal that lives in that environment, it basically smothers you to death. It is similar to humans breathing in smog for fish who breathe dissolved oxygen in the water. It covers fish eggs as well as the benthic dwellers on the bottom. It makes it difficult for fish to hunt because it blocks sunlight, and other pollutants attach to sediment particles. So basically, when you stir up sediment, you've stirred up all that other stuff that's run into the water as well. So the best way to fight sediment is plants. The roots hold the soil in place. So the best example of that I can think of around here is the dune grass at the beach. They don't want you to touch the dune grass, don't breathe on the dune grass, don't look at it funny. And that is because that grass holds the sand in place to create the dunes that provides protection for the back part of the island. You can also, when you're gardening, if you don't want to have to constantly mulch, hardwood triple shredded mulch is recommended. It doesn't float as easily. I know lots of places use pine straw here, and there's nothing wrong with that. You're just going to work yourself to death if you put pine straw down as your substrate when you're gardening. But if you have a lot of it, and again, you're trying to get your feel-good organisms in by being outside, then more power to you. You can, if you see something wrong, you can call 1-866-STOP-MUD, and that goes to the state office and they report it, and we actually have a local person that enforces that state Sediment and Erosion Control Act here for Hanover County. So vehicle pollution, some of us don't think about this one as much. You know, we see that rainbow in the parking lot and we know what it is, but do we think about the impact? So vehicles, as they wear down, brake dust, bits of tire, things like that, end up in our waterways as well. Also, washing a vehicle or a boat on an impervious surface washes that soap into our storm drain system. Some soaps also have phosphorus in them. So you can buy phosphorus-free soap, but there could also be some other chemical in it that we are not sure what it does yet, kind of like DDT was several years ago. So that's something to keep in mind. And soaps that contain phosphates lower the surface tension of the water and make fish more susceptible to bacteria and parasites because that slimy layer that coats them, that protects them, wears away. So vehicle solutions, if you have a leak, fix it. And if you've noticed, I've not said anything super radical yet. All of our solutions have been actions, and they have been simple actions that almost anybody can do. So if you have a leak, fix it, clean up spills, and dispose of it properly. We also have the options to drive less by biking or carpooling or riding public transportation. And Wilmington is working on creating more bike paths that is more friendly to bicyclists. And then you should also wash your car on the grass or at a car wash. So if you wash it in the grass, it's not going to kill your grass, but it will filter into the ground and also maybe provide some nutrients if it has phosphorus in it. The car wash actually recycles some of their water and catches what they do not recycle. So that's why during droughts, car washes can still operate. So what I was talking about with different chemicals in soap, biodegradable does not mean environmentally friendly. Some advertisements would like you to believe that, but the Consumers Union, publisher of Consumers Report magazines, says there is no specific standards for biodegradable claim and no official organization exists to verify this claim. So it's kind of like vitamins. Vitamins are not regulated by the FDA. So you have to do your research and find out what everything means before you take them. This litter pollution, so this is the number one pollutant that when I talk to students, they're aware of. That's the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about water pollution. And it's pretty self-explanatory that it costs a lot to clean it up. It's harmful to wildlife. It causes, even if it didn't do those two things, do you want to swim in a beach that's got stuff from somebody else floating everywhere? So I went to the Bahamas in college, and they had a beach called Trash Beach. And it was called that because it was in the cruise ship lane. And the cruise ships would dump their trash. And our project was find 7 pieces of trash written in a different language. We were able to find that within 15 minutes. So that's something to think about. So some of the wildlife impacts, they mistake it for food or become strangled or entangled in it. This picture that you're viewing is a juvenile albatross found in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands of Midway or Laysan, whose parents fed it plastic found in the ocean. And my counterpart at the city, this is a picture her friend actually took of the juvenile albatross on said island. So litter, well, this is Burnt Mill Creek. This is a creek here in town. And again, I would not want to swim or do any kind of recreational activity in this area. It gives me the willies to think about that. Things that you can do, use a trash can. Again, simple, but 60% of the trash at the beach ends up because it washed there or blew there in the wind. So say you're at the mall and you drop a cracker wrapper, it's probably going to end up at Wrightsville Beach or the Intercoastal Waterway. You can practice the 5 R's, which is reduce, reuse, recycle, repurpose, and refuse. The repurpose is one that some folks are less familiar with. An example of that would be make a t-shirt into a bag. And then the refuse will be refuse a plastic bag or other disposable item when you're shopping. Use the t-shirt bag that you just made. North Carolina also has a program called Swat a Litter Bug. It is information intense. You have to have the North Carolina license plate, the date, the time, the county, the road, and what they threw out the window. Then they get a letter that says, "Dear so-and-so, somebody seen you litter on on March 23rd in front of on 132 South College Road," or whatever, or at the intersection of Wilshire and College. These are the detrimental impacts of litter. So it's an education program aimed at trying to reduce litter in our state. So everything that I've said that you can do as an alternative is a best management practice. That is an action. So picking up dog poop, not blowing leaves into the storm drain, using less fertilizer are all action best management practices. But we also have programs, well, we also can do physical things to make an impact as well. And those are things like rain barrels, rain gardens, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The district, New Hanover Soil and Water, offers 3 different programs where we help pay to install certain best management practices. So depending on where you live, depends on which pool of funding you qualify for. So we sell rain barrels at a discounted price to help incentivize folks to buy them. But then we also install rain gardens, and this is an example of one of the rain gardens we've helped install. And a rain garden is basically a depression in between the source of runoff, so like your house, your driveway, your gutters, and the storm drain. Lots of times your yard may already have a depression or may already hold water in that area. And so those are things that we look at when we decide what practice would work best for your property. And then other best management practices include cisterns. If you have certain soil types do not qualify for rain gardens, but they do qualify for wetlands, which is similar practice. And I'm trying to think. Swales is also another practice that we've helped install as well. So if you're in the city of Wilmington and you see somebody dumping anything into the storm drain, blowing anything into the storm drain that's not water, you can call this number and report them. And it's really more for an education tool because we don't want these things in the water. Another good way to make a difference is get involved. I know lots of groups recently have offered COVID-safe cleanups or tree plantings, things like that. We actually offer a storm drain marking program. If you're interested in getting a volunteer group together, we can help you with that. But you passing on the knowledge that you have to other people is what makes a difference, and you being the example for other people to follow. Here is our website, the City of Wilmington Stormwater Services, as well as Soil and Water, and you will this will be recorded so you can refer to it later. And then we do like your feedback. So if we can probably copy and paste this into the email that's going to be sent out, and you can give feedback that way. Does anybody have any questions?
That was fantastic. Thank you, Drew, so much for putting together this presentation for all of us today. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand. There's like a little raise hand icon, and we will call on you to unmute yourself and ask your question. Also, a reminder, in the chat there is a giveaway link that you can enter, so just click on that link if you are able to open the chat. It was also in the reminder email if you were able to get that as well. So Pam is asking, are there regulation laws on diverting stormwater by installing pipes causing farm and animal wastewater to flooding standing water onto neighbors' property in Orange County? And Pam, if you need to clarify any of that, feel free to unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. I live in Orange County. I have 11 acres, and I have 2 areas on my property now that has a lot of water that crosses it and stands on the property because of a neighbor putting, diverting the stormwater off of their property onto mine, which, also has, I guess, animal feces in it. Mm-hmm. And so I was just wondering if there's anything I can do. I mean, because it's naturally flowing across the properties, but they need some extra pipes to push it a little more onto mine. It's sitting there. And now my property has been declared in the watershed, and I bought it 6 years ago.
So I would contact your local planning department to see what ordinances they may have, and if there's someone that can help you with that. I know it really depends on the municipality on how they treat that.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. Yeah, if anyone has any more questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand.
Drew, one thing I see a lot is water draining onto adjacent properties. That's an ongoing problem I hear throughout the Cape Fear region. What, again, I guess sort of following up on Pam's question, what sort of recourse do neighbors have when those issues are manifesting? Where should they go for support?
It really depends. Like I told Pam, it really depends on what your local ordinances are in the municipality you live in. So like if you live in the city of Wilmington versus Carolina Beach, they may be different. And there may not be an ordinance at all, so you may not have any recourse. I've been to more than one homeowner's property that's been in this situation. Sometimes we can help them and install a rain garden that helps absorb that water. However, it's really important to remember water quality and water quantity are not always entwined, just sometimes. So my programs are for quality, and if I can prove that I'm making a quality impact, but it also takes care of your quantity issue, then it's a good thing. We have to do site visits to determine what's the best fit for each homeowner.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying. That's really good information. Lots of thank yous in the chat. Colin is asking, do you use any water monitoring systems?
So the city and the county both have private consultants that they pay to do water quality monitoring. And then they report, the city has to put that in their report to the EPA, the results. And then at the state level, they have things called basin-wide plans that they update like every 10 years that has the data that's being collected from all these different organizations compiled into one document. So the most, I know here in New Hanover County, the water quality is being monitored so we can see where the problems are and how to improve it.
Awesome, great information. We have a question from an Earth Science class that is joining us today. How can school groups become involved in stormwater best practices?
So, first of all, Miss Pollock, are you the one that emailed me about having this presentation, or are you a different teacher?
That's me.
Okay. What county are you in?
We're in Cleveland County.
Okay. So what I would suggest, and I can get the contact for you, your local soil and water district has the tools to do an assessment at the school site. We have done this in the past where we go to the school and we give the students a worksheet, and they identify where a BMP would go, what kind of what kind of BMP they would use and why. So we've done that here locally with high school and college students. What I'll try to do is get the contact for the soil and water in Cleveland County and get it to you, and also send them any materials that I have that could help them with that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions? We have a few more minutes, so if there's any last minute questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand.
Drew, do you all ever run those workshops for community groups? Because that sounds like it would be a great thing for our local island wildlife chapter when gathering restrictions are
I mean, that's definitely something we can schedule and do if you're interested.
Yeah.
I would give the caveat that to design a rain garden does require some math. So and when I say math, I mean calculus. So I would, identifying where a BMP goes is simple enough to figure out. However, sizing a BMP can get a little more complicated because they are sized to the amount of water that's potentially flowing through them. That doesn't mean, though, that you can't make a rain garden and make an impact. It's just you need to follow some basic guidelines: 50 feet away from your foundation, 50 feet away from a well, check where the water table is and see if the soil perks. So that is something that we could definitely maybe even work with you with to come up with that example sheet of, here's some do's and don'ts if you want to do your own.
So maybe for high school students, not so much for elementary school students.
Right.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome, fantastic. This has been such a great presentation, and I'm sure we have all just learned so much about stormwater. I know I definitely did. So Drew, if anybody else has any further questions, is the best way to contact you through the website?
Yeah, or my email. I'll put my email in chat. Anyone that wants can email me directly. Perfect.
And I'll include that in the follow-up email once the recording is ready to be sent out as well. But thank you, Drew, so much for doing this. And I'll turn it over to Virginia to close us out. And also remember that if you want to enter the drawing, that link is in the chat.
Very good. Thank you guys so much. This was amazing. On next Tuesday, we have Susan Campbell, who is a biologist who specializes in hummingbirds and hummingbird banding, will be with us. And Susan is amazing. I had her band an overwintering hummingbird at my house a couple of years ago, and it's definitely a fun topic. So I hope you'll join us then.
Thank you for having us, Virginia.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming, Drew.